The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation's capital and are a public service of your television provider. C-SPAN, created by cable. This week on the Communicators, interviews from the Cable Show in Washington, D.C., including a look at issues facing the cable industry with analyst Jessica Reif Cohen. We'll also hear about the Media Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission with Bureau Chief Bill Lake.
And now joining us on the Communicators is Jessica Reif Cohen, a Managing Director at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Ms. Cohen, what do you do?
I am a research analyst covering media and entertainment and cable and satellite.
So when it comes to the cable industry, what's its economic health overall?
We're actually very bullish on cable. They have a huge, big, fat pipe into the home with multiple services. So obviously, initially it was video, and over time that's become, most importantly, broadband, but also voice. Rolling out other services on top of that, like home monitoring. It's home security plus. So it could be things like managing the thermostat or turning on your pool heater, or nanny cam or pet cam, etc. So there are new services that are beginning to roll out on that platform. At the same time, cable is also rolling out SME or small and medium enterprise business. So the same thing, video, voice, and data. And that, we're finally starting to see the cable plant be leveraged in many ways. Another separate investment point for cable is that the industry finally, after years and years of hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, has become free cash flow positive. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen very significant return of capital to shareholders, mostly through buybacks, but also through dividends. And that's a gigantic change for the industry.
And when did that occur?
I'd say in the last 5 years, we've seen the industry go earnings and free cash flow positive.
Jessica Reif Cohen, is the cable name a misnomer anymore?
I mean, there are still cables, but it's a multi-service platform, and we'll see more and more of that. We will see, I think you'll see at this convention, we'll start to see a lot more advancement. You know, technology is an enabler of many things. People don't buy, I mean, you're buying TV, but what I think we'll see are things like cloud-based guides, which will make the guide that we as consumers use much easier to use, friendlier, but also make TV a much more enjoyable experience. So think of like an iTunes guide or a Netflix guide, a Hulu guide. I think we're going to start to see that from cable, and that's a really welcome change. Like being able to search for things and actually find them, or these recommendation engines. I can't tell you how many times I've had to search for Homeland or anything. It's something for one of my kids. So I think that will make a very big difference in terms of what it does for churn, what it does for even revenue for the cable operators. This is a really big opportunity.
Are cable operators gaining customers or losing customers?
Cable's been losing customers. They've been losing video customers at the expense of competitors, whether it's satellites or telcos. And if we believe speculation, Intel is about to come out with a new product. There may be others behind them with over-the-top type video services. But in terms of broadband, cable's been gaining subs and gaining market share. And so in most of the country, they have a far superior product to anything else that's offered. Voice, they're gaining subs because the incumbent were the telephone companies, so with their subs to lose. But there's also a pretty significant amount, like 30%, 35% wireless substitution. So that's obviously hurt the telcos way more than cable. Cable's been gaining voice subs, but at a kind of a slower pace than they had previously. On the business side, that's all of cable's gain. They're not the incumbent, and they've been gaining pretty significant market share.
When you look at a Comcast, a different business model, they have both a network and they're a cable operator, cable provider, and a network. Is that business model a future for other cable companies?
Every company has a different approach. And so when Comcast bought NBC Universal, there was a lot of discussion. Were they doing the right thing or not? Because it didn't work for other companies. Time Warner spun out their cable, they spun out AOL, sold Warner Music, they're spinning out publishing. So it didn't work for them. They had a very different personality, different culture. In the case of Comcast, our subjective view is that this will work extremely well. They have really strong communication throughout the company. There's very strong management. And our view, they basically stole NBCU. They paid a really good price. It was a very good deal structure. They bought it at a very good time when advertising was extremely weak, before it was obvious that retransmission consent would be a big revenue generator for the networks, for the broadcasters. And so they bought it very well, right timing, right price, right structure. At this point, NBC is it's a distant performer. It's not, it's getting better, but it's still very, far from where it should and could be. So our view is that NBC Universal is the stealth media play. Comcast is getting virtually no credit for NBCU. If they execute well, so in our analysis, we said if Comcast trades in line with the other cable operators, the implied value for NBC Universal is somewhere between $5 and $8 per Comcast share. If they do a great job, if they execute well, then over the next 2 years, this could be worth $20 a share. If they execute flawlessly, just absolutely perfectly, maybe it's $30. But if they just kind of muddle along, it's worth what it's worth today. So there's this option that investors have, and our view is that Steve Burke is a guy who knows the industry well. He was the heir apparent at Disney for a long time, and he's got very strong management under him. They know what they need to do to fix those businesses, and each one of those businesses, whether it's the broadcast business, the cable network business, theme park or film, or international, has huge upside.
So when you see a potential product like Aereo coming out onto the market, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's not for me to opine on whether Aereo is legal or not. I don't think it changes the course of retrans. Retrans is a very interesting concept, meaning retransmission consent is the money that broadcasters get for providing their signal to pay TV operators. And we're kind of in like the third round of retrans. So the first round maybe was 40 to 50 cents. The second round was close to $1. And in our view, that the broadcasters will ultimately get, not ultimately, in the next round we'll get to the $2 range in the out years of the contracts. So there's another big step up. And they provide great programming. The broadcasters to this day provide great programming. Aereo is, I mean, it's hard to believe that it's legal, but we'll see. It will wind its way through the courts. We'll see how many people pay for just several broadcast signals and get nothing else. But I don't think it's a game changer at this point for the pay TV industry. And I certainly think from a broadcasting perspective, we follow entertainment as well. We don't believe there's a risk that they will lose retransmission revenue from Aereo.
But the technology is there.
Well, there's tons of technology that people don't watch blank screens, and if it's illegal, they're not going to have. It doesn't matter that they found a workaround; they won't have the programming. And so there are a lot of challenges. There are loads of technology challenges, and have been for years. Providing programming, you need to have the right. Is Hopper legal? Can you skip ads? Can you take programming in a virtual sling box? There are tons and tons of disruptive technologies that may or may not be illegal.
Jessica Reif Cohen, John McCain is talking about his a la carte cable bill once again. Is that a disruptor?
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of support. I'd be a little bit more worried about it from the programmer's perspective. The programmers do not want to unbundle, have their networks unbundled. They don't want to sell individual networks because if you're Viacom and you have 15 networks, how many operators would take more than MTV and Nickelodeon? Would they take the full suite of channels? So it's a risk for all programmers. I mean, of course, it's a risk for pay TV as well, but it doesn't. But it's both sides. It's not like one side's rooting for a la carte and the other isn't. It's a big risk for anybody who has sports. If there's a la carte, how many people would actually pay a lot for sports? I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Do you think there's a chance that it will go through?
It doesn't feel that way. It certainly doesn't feel that way.
When you look at the horizon and you think about the future of TV and TV everywhere, what do you see?
Well, the great thing about whether it's TV everywhere, authentication, and the multiple devices that many of us have, is that it's made, and many of these disruptive technologies, like Twitter, for example, or Facebook, it's made the television experience, for some it's made it better, it's made it different. But a lot of what's going on in this social networking universe is all about what's on TV. It's made people close. It's made people closer to shows and more involved in shows. But there's more to it. There are ways to catch up. So historically, you would see what would be normal would be in year 3, 4, or 5 of a show would peak and start to come down. People would lose interest. Instead, what we're seeing with many shows is that in year 3, 4, or 5, the viewership is going up because people are binge viewing, whether it's Netflix or video on demand. They're catching up, and now people are talking about Homeland. So now Homeland season 2 did better than season 1, or Downton Abbey, whatever, any Walking Dead or Mad Men. It doesn't matter, any show. But you're starting to see audiences build where historically you would lose audiences. So it's been an amazing, technology has been an amazing enabler. And I guess the biggest shock to me as an analyst who's covered the industry for, I won't say how many decades, but decades, plural, is that viewing time has gone up. And it's gone up from per home from 5 or 6 hours a day to over 8 hours. So it's not per person, but per home. That's an astounding amount of television that people are watching. There's really no danger that television, we have a great product, and particularly American companies, as huge, we have a very big universe, a very big single country, so our programming tends to get exported. There's a lot of money in that. And so as Americans, we love our TV, and those TV shows get sold over and over, so it's a very profitable industry on a global basis as well.
How'd you get started in this industry?
Oh my God. But eons ago, I started at a small company, a small boutique, and the person who hired me, I will forever be indebted, Alan Raphael, took a chance on a young person.
Were you interested in the cable industry, or did they assign you to it?
I was lucky. I mean, honestly, I was hired by a guy who covered entertainment, and had I been hired by the guy who covered auto, I would not be an analyst today. It was a lot of luck, and it evolved. I mean, when I started covering cable, it was really, really small and a very highly levered industry. It was very different. It was meant to make people couldn't see television. They couldn't actually get clear signals, and it's evolved. I mean, one of the first companies I followed was MTV when it was a public company, and I was like, I remember that slogan, "I want my MTV," and it's the demographics have changed cable television. Younger people, as they got their own households, wanted to watch multi-channel, multiple, and we'll see the same thing with broadband. Broadband penetration in the U.S. is, well, depending on what statistic you take, whether you include DSL or not, but high-speed data is 50% plus. Over time, our view is that will be 85 or 90%. And so there's still a very long runway for cable, purely in broadband, not even including SME, the commercial business, or home monitoring, and whatever that becomes.
What are some of the storm clouds that are potential in the cable industry?
The cost of programming is is really scary. It's a very bad trend line, and there are 3 drivers of programming cost inflation. Retransmission consent, which really cash started getting paid to broadcasters in the last 5 or 7 years. Before that, retransmission consent was used to get more channel carriage. So if Fox wanted a new channel for FX or Fox News, it was part of retransmission consent. So that's a new cost, and it's a growing cost. Sports has gotten completely insane. driven by the teams and the team owners. So the teams have started their own channels, their regional sports channels, where NFL is charging a lot of money, and these costs get passed on to, to eventually to the pay TV providers, cable, satellite, telco, and then to consumers. And then the third driver are just normal negotiations. So you see companies that they've really delivered, they've invested in programming. I'll take a Discovery, for example. Their program budget went from $500 million less than 5 years ago to $1.1 billion. And so it's a different company today than it was in the last round of contract negotiations. So our view is that they will get very decent price increases without retrans and without sports, just simply because they've delivered very high quality programming across multiple channels, whether it's Discovery, TLC, Animal Planet, or ID, which didn't exist in the last contract, Science, Military Channel, OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, et cetera, et cetera.
How closely do you watch the FCC, watch Congress as an analyst?
We have less angst at the moment. There are less issues pending, but it can be a very big deal at times. And luckily, the government took a very light hand in broadband and broadband pricing, which stimulated the industry to invest. In the end, that was a very positive thing. So we have these big pipes with very fast, high-speed data, which is getting faster and faster. So the speeds are going up and up. Had the industry been regulated with price caps, the level of investment probably would have been lower. I mean, I was around for the days of the Reed Hunt FCC when there was rate rollbacks, and the cable industry found a loophole, and then they were the FCC closed the loophole, and there were truly 17% rate rollbacks. It was disastrous for years. So I think the light touch of the FCC has actually been a big benefit to the industry, because there's been a massive amount of investment, and that's been to the benefit of consumers ultimately.
Jessica Reif Cohen, one of the issues we talked quite a bit about on the Communicators and here in Washington is the issue of net neutrality. Yep. A couple of court cases working their way through right now. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. I guess the Verizon case is the one that's coming up, but hopefully, I think that the providers of broadband have generally. I mean, look, it's not for me. I'm not a regulator. It feels like they're not favoring their own networks. But I shouldn't opine. I think that broadband, there are many flavors and many prices, and consumers do have options to pay lower prices for lower speeds, higher prices for higher speeds, and generally when offered the choice, if someone can afford it, they will always prefer to pay for the higher speeds. But there are many flavors and many options out there. And so far, I think it's the lighter regulatory touch has been a big positive.
Do you know Tom Wheeler at all?
I do not know him. I hear excellent things about him.
Is there a danger in getting too close to the people you analyze? Is that possible to happen?
You're saying from a FCC?
As an analyst, for you. Is there a danger in getting too close to these companies? I mean, you've covered them for 20, 30 years.
As an analyst, really, honestly, we hope that we always have a very objective opinion, and that we can see if we didn't have, if we weren't as analysts able to provide a truly, if we weren't able to give it an honest appraisal, then we actually have no value to our clients. And I think this is a lot of what's happened in the past. People can see through that. If you're really acting as a pawn for a company, investors see through that, and there's really no value. So you have to be honest and very objective, and really try to call it as we see it. And sometimes that doesn't make us very popular with the companies. And honestly, sometimes it doesn't make us popular with investors. If they own a stock and you're negative, it's not a pleasant experience to go through.
Jessica Reif Cohen, wireless. A lot of people are cutting the cord.
Have
the cable companies been able to take advantage of that?
cable is offering more and more Wi-Fi, more hotspots, but really the bulk of traffic gets transferred anyway to the wireline service. To get really high-speed Wi-Fi, you need a fixed line wire somewhere. And so it augments it, it gives us mobility, but we don't see wireless broadband as an effective substitution for wireline.
Jessica Reif Cohen, who is with Bank of America and Merrill Lynch, a managing director, been covering the cable industry for years. You're watching the Communicators on C-SPAN. Well, now on the Communicators, we want to introduce you to William Lake. He is the bureau chief, the media bureau chief for the Federal Communications Commission. Get a chance to meet somebody behind the scenes. Mr. Lake, what is the Media Bureau and what do you do?
The Media Bureau is the part of the Commission that makes policy and recommends policy to the Commission on the electronic media, broadcast, radio, and television, and the cable industry.
So what's one of the issues right now before the Media Bureau?
One of the big issues we have is what's called our incentive auction, which is an attempt to enable some of the broadcasters to surrender their spectrum voluntarily so it can be auctioned off to the wireless carriers and the broadcasters will share in the revenues from the auction. It's a big project. It's something we've never done before, so it's taking a lot of activity.
So the professional staff at the Media Bureau, is it going to happen in 2014? Are you ready for it to happen in 2014?
We're on schedule, and it's something that the Media Bureau is doing with the other bureaus. It cuts it really across the agency, but we think we're on schedule. It's aggressive, but to have the rules adopted this year and the auction held next year.
Now, do you work with Congress closely on those rules and that adoption?
We worked very closely with Congress and followed their enactment of the law. This was a proposal that we made which required legislation. Since then, they're certainly watching what we do and mostly urging us on to make sure that we keep our self-imposed deadlines.
Well, it's June 2013 that we're taping this interview. Where are you right now in the process?
We've gone through all the public comment process, and we're now in the process of formulating recommended rules that we'll send up to the Commission with the hope that they'll vote on it before the end of the year.
So, Mr. Lake, how often do you meet with the commissioners on where you are?
I meet with each of the commissioners at least every 2 weeks, and with the chairman's office more often, and we report to them regularly on where we stand. And we will probably at the June meeting do a public report on our progress at the meeting.
And you have to meet with them individually, correct?
Yes.
Because of sunshine laws?
Yes, they don't meet any more than 2 of them at a time.
What other issues are you working on?
One of the other things that we're spending a lot of time on is implementation of the Accessibility Act. Congress passed a statute to try to make all of the electronic media more accessible to people with various handicaps. And right now we're tackling something that's the last step in our process, which is to try to make program guides, the user interface of the program guide you see on television, accessible to those who are visually impaired. So a talking program guide, if you will, which is a simple concept but quite complicated as a technical matter to implement. So we'll work very closely with the industry to try to get it right.
And the cable companies, telcos, working with you on that as well?
Yes. We just put out a notice, and then we'll get formal comments and then lots of informal help from the affected disability groups as well as from the industry.
Well, one of the issues that you're responsible for, at least tracking, are cable rates, correct?
Yes.
How have cable rates gone up in the last 5 years? How much? And is there a limit to where they can go?
We just issued an annual report, and what we found was consistent with what we found in recent years, which is that the average price of expanded basic, what most people subscribe to, continues to go up. I think it went up about 6% in the last year. The price per channel has actually gone down in recent years, so that what we see is consumers are getting more channels but paying more for the package. Whether that's good or bad, is not our job. We're reporting on it at the moment.
Your job is simply to report how they're right.
Yes, I think we're interested in watching the cost of programming generally to cable because it's a consumer issue. But in this instance, what we're doing is just reporting so that the world will know what's happening to cable rates.
As the media bureau chief at the FCC, are there some laws that have become outdated because of changing technology?
Well, we mostly do what Congress tells us to do, but it is true that the last major overhaul was in 1996, before the internet was really a major phenomenon and before all the changes that are going on in the video marketplace. So there are many people in Congress who think it might be time to revisit the law, but in the meantime, we implement the law we have.
Has your work slowed down because there's only 3 commissioners currently?
Not at all, no. In particular, we're on a very tight schedule for the incentive auction, as I mentioned. We're continuing. I don't know whether that will be voted on by the commission when it's a 3-member commission or after we get the 2 additional members, but we want to serve it up so that it can be acted on this year.
Mr. Lake, what's your background?
I am a lawyer. Most of my career I practiced law with a large law firm in Washington, but this is my 4th time in the federal government. So I've gone in and out several times.
And your second time at the FCC or
no,
first time?
Well, I came in 2009 at the beginning of the Obama administration to oversee the final stages of the DTV broadcast transition and stayed on as media bureau chief. So that's 2 jobs, but 1 time at the commission.
William Lake, are we ready to put a period on the digital transition?
Almost. There are still some rules we have that haven't been updated for the digital world, and we're trying to work those through. But yes, I think so. Of course, the broadcast industry has to keep evolving like all the other media industries, and they're now considering a possible new digital TV standard to replace the one that was adopted when we did the first transition. So change is inevitable in all of the media industries.
With so many people now watching video on wireless devices or on computers, the television, the traditional television model has changed. Does that make it difficult for you, or do regulations need to be adapted to fit that?
We try to adapt our regulations to the marketplace, again within the 4 corners of the statute that we administer, and certainly the change is very dynamic in the video marketplace, both in terms of services and the devices on which people can watch the services.
Well, a chance to meet somebody behind the scenes at the Federal Communications Commission. William Lake is the Media Bureau Chief. You're watching the Communicators on C-SPAN.